to some proverbs that a couple are in the Bible, but some of them are just from practical everyday use that we'll go over just as sort of introductory. Some of these are humorous. Some of these are just really wise. So two topics today. The first one is patriotism, and that's kind of apropos given the season that we're in from a political standpoint. And then pessimism and optimism. So first, patriotism. Hebrews 13:17 says, "Obey them that have the rule over you." As difficult as it is, you know, we're really supposed to obey those in authority. Sometimes they don't necessarily deserve it, but our role is to obey and to be good citizens. Proverbs 29:2 says, "When the righteous are in authority," ever remember that? When the righteous were in authority? "The people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." So the Bible has something to say about patriotism. We are to be patriotic. Here's what George Washington said, our very first president. "It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible." Wow, we've come a long way from that, haven't we? And then JFK said, "Dealing with bureaucracy is like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall." Sorry, jelly. Well, Jell-O, jelly, both work. Trying to nail them to a wall is a little bit difficult. Will Rogers said, "Just be glad you're not getting all the government you're paying for." So he takes a dig at taxes, he takes a dig at inefficiency of the government, and both of them are correct. And then this one is not humorous, but boy, it just really draws home the fact that we haven't seen a real statesman in a long time. The difference between a politician and a statesman. A politician thinks of the next election, and a statesman thinks of the next generation. Boy, we should get back to that. And then pessimism, optimism. Proverbs 10:24 says, "The fear of the wicked," you can think of that, the pessimism, the fear of the wicked, "it shall come upon him, but the desire of the righteous shall be granted." And then here's one for all the engineers in the room. I know at least two in here. The optimist, "The glass is half full." The pessimist, "The glass is half empty." The engineer, "There's twice as much glass as you need." The optimist sees an opportunity in every calamity, and the pessimist sees a calamity in every opportunity. A sportsman who takes a frying pan on a fishing trip is an optimist. Now, I must be an optimist because when I was a teenager, I used to go on a lot of fishing trips, a lot of camping fishing trips, and we would take a frying pan with us, we'd take some Crisco with us, and we'd take some cornmeal with us, and very often we would have some fish to fry up. But I might be a little bit of a pessimist because we would also bring a can of Spam with us. And if you didn't catch any fish, you could take that Spam, cornmeal it, fry it, along with some potatoes and some campfire beans, and you could have a really, really good time. And then finally, an Italian proverb, "Since the house is on fire, let us warm ourselves." That's right, or at least opportunistic. The house is on fire, we might as well warm ourselves. Okay, so we're going to get into the Bible now, into Proverbs chapter 22. And actually, we're at a transition point. If you look at the way Proverbs is broken up, the first 9 chapters of Proverbs was Solomon talking to his son, basically, and giving him a series of lectures, instructions that he wanted his son to be aware of. And so they had some theme and arrangement to those first 9 chapters. Then starting in chapter 10 up until the 16th verse of chapter 22, you have just one verse Proverbs. And one proverb doesn't necessarily relate to the one before it or the one after it. It's just like a machine gun, one firing after the other of a proverb, and each one very different, very unique, but all of them typically had 2 phrases. and the phrases separated by a conjunction, often and or but. And really, it was either comparing things, or the second phrase would emphasize the first phrase, or it would contrast. Here's what happens if you use wisdom. Here's what happens if you use foolishness. So we're going to leave that, and now we're going to a section that is going to have more common themes, and typically in 2-verse couplets at this point. So 2 verses together that fits, but sometimes even more than that. And so most commentators believe this section begins here at verse 17, and then it goes to Proverbs 24:22. So for a couple of chapters, that's what we're going to have. And sometimes this is called the 30 sayings of the wise. I read that several commentators said that. And then it takes 5 verses to introduce this section. So verses 17 to 21 are an introduction that Solomon gives to this section. And it's basically a call to attention. If you remember, when he was talking to his son, when he would enter kind of a new section of that, he would say, you know, lend me your ears, pay attention. I've got something to tell you. And so the same thing here. He says, bow down thine ear. In other words, humble yourself and prepare to hear. Hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart unto my knowledge. For it is a pleasant thing if thou keep them within thee. They shall withal be fitted in thy lips, that thy trust may be in the Lord. I have made known to thee this day, even to thee, have not I written to thee excellent things and counsels and knowledge, that I might make thee know the certainty of the words of truth, that thou mightest answer the words of truth to them that sent unto thee. So this introduction, he starts off again, bow down your ear, or humble yourself, prepare yourself for things that I want to teach you here. Open your heart, open your ears, pay attention. This is going to be important. That's the purpose of this introduction here. And when I think through this, I wonder, how much time do we spend sort of getting ready for Sunday? I mean, Sunday's the Lord's Day. It's a day where we come to learn, to be challenged. What if we were to take time, say like on Saturday, maybe Saturday night, and begin praying for the service, praying that things will go well according to God's will, that God will bring people in our path, and that we would have our hearts ready for the service and prayerful. And so there's a preparation we should do before coming into the Lord's house. And then Solomon says, boy, these words of wisdom that you're going to hear, they're going to be pleasant. They may be difficult in terms of obeying them, but they will bring pleasantness into your life. And that thy trust may be in the Lord. True wisdom makes us more dependent on God, not less. Solomon has introduced this section, and now he's going to start, and he's going to start with some 2-verse themes. And in verse 22, he says, "Rob not the poor, because he is poor. Neither oppress the afflicted in the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause and spoil the soul of those that spoil them." So it's kind of a common theme, but it's talking about poor, and then it's talking about afflicted. And it says, don't oppress the afflicted in the gate. Now, the gate was an area where people could go, kind of like we would go into a courthouse, maybe hire a lawyer, and try to get some justice. Well, the gate was a place to find justice. It's a place where you could go, if it was a serious enough of an issue, you could go directly to the king, but typically maybe one of the king's appointed judges that you could go to and have your case heard. And it's saying, not only don't rob from the poor, but these people that are trying to get justice, don't don't oppress them. Give them an opportunity to get that justice. And he says, if you don't, the Lord's going to plead their case. And he'll spoil the souls of them that spoil them. So be cautious about taking advantage of the poor or taking advantage of those that are protected. And even if someone is poor because of some bad decisions, and that's often the case when people are poor, it's some bad decisions, some foolish behavior, you shouldn't take advantage of that. You shouldn't rob them. Robbing the poor has got to carry more punishment than just merely refusing to help. You know, throughout the Bible it talks about that we should be sensitive to the poor, help the poor, do things that we can for them. Now, the book of Proverbs, I think, has a really good balance when it comes to poverty. It talks about you need to help those that have less than you, but also be cautious. In other words, you don't take someone who has demonstrated an ability to be very foolish with the way they spend money. You don't just go pour a lot of money on them. That's the worst thing you can do for them. But you can help them feed. You can teach them some things and so forth. So be careful. Treat those that are poor properly. And then anyone who is afflicted, don't rub salt in the wound. Don't oppress them. Be careful that just because you're in a position of power, maybe you're in a position of great wealth, that you don't take those who are less powerful and take advantage of that situation. The poor can't defend themselves with great resources and influence. The rich man's treatment of the poor says a lot about the rich man's character. It shows how he treats those whom culture and the communities may say are beneath him. It reveals one's heart in many ways. Here's a quote by Dwayne Garrett. He said, "Concern for the poor is common in both biblical and pagan wisdom literature. The distinctive Israelite perspective, however, is that Yahweh is viewed as protector of the oppressed." And then Adam Clark said, "Woe, therefore, to them that oppress them, for they will have God, not the poor, to deal with." And that's what God is saying in this verse. You take advantage of them, I'll step in and I'll take care of things. Verse 24 and 25 are another grouping of verses. And this one's really talking about choose your friends wisely. Verse 24, "Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul." Have you ever heard someone who has chosen real poorly on a friend say, "Well, I think I'll be a good influence on them and I'll help them get better"? Often it's the other way around. It's the one who is foolish that drags the other one down. So this verse is saying it does matter who you hang out with and who your friends are. Take time, choose them carefully. In this instance, a person who can't control their anger displays bad character and can be a dangerous companion. Wisdom chooses friends carefully and should make no friendship with an angry man. John Trapp had some colorful language. He talked about this verse this way. He said, "Anger is a short madness. It is a leprosy breaking out of a burning and renders a man unfit for civil society." Be careful. If someone that's just always... Now, the Bible talks about how even Christ took retribution against those that were in the temple and they were being dishonest with people from a money standpoint. And it says he got angry. There's nothing wrong with an appropriate anger at the right time, but that should not be our character. That should not be what we do all the time. Anger should be very targeted, something that is not right, something that is not righteous, and that gets dealt with, and we don't carry that anger around with us. Adam Clark said, from those with whom we associate, we acquire habits and learn their ways, imbibe their spirit, show their tempers, and walk in their steps. We cannot be too choice of our company, for we may soon learn ways that will be a snare to our soul. And then Charles Bridges said, being friends of a hot-tempered man is like living in a house that is on fire. How quickly does a young person living with a proud man become like him and turn into an overbearing person? So again, a lot of Proverbs is about practical living, and this is a very practical thing that says, hey, be careful who you make friends with, and choose good people to hang out with. And then verse 26 and 27. Quite a bit of Proverbs talks about money, the management of money, and this is a couple of verses that does that as well. It says, be not thou one of them that strike hands. Now today we would say shake hands or signs a contract, makes a deal. Be not thou one of them that strike hands, or of them that are sureties for debts. Closest thing we have to that is like co-signing a note or agreeing that, hey, I'll take care of whatever debt that they make. It's saying, hey, don't be one of those. Be careful. You can get in bad trouble with that. If thou hast nothing to pay, why should he take away thy bed from under thee? So we've talked about this 2 or 3 times throughout Proverbs because this is kind of a repetitive verse. It first showed up when Solomon was talking to his son and instructions for his son. He told him to be careful about doing this. It's a dangerous thing to become responsible for the debts of another person. In essence, you're the one on the hook, not that other person. And then we know from Proverbs that personal debt is to be avoided. Matter of fact, in this chapter, in verse 7, it said, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. It's saying, hey, be very careful about borrowing. So this, I think Proverbs deals with both sides of this issue. Be careful about borrowing. It can eat you alive, particularly with things like credit cards and things like that. But then it says, also be careful that you're not the lender in essence. You're not the co-signer. You're not the person striking the deal. Use wisdom when it comes to how you manage your money. Now, some people will quote Romans 13:8 that says, owe no man anything, and quote that as, well, you are never ever in your life ever to take out a loan. I don't think that's exactly what that verse is saying when it says, owe no man anything. I think what it means, maybe think about it this way, is you meet your obligations. If you have an obligation, you meet it. And I think a practical piece of advice is never borrow money on something that depreciates in value. Only borrow money if something is an asset that appreciates. And if you were to take out a loan on something like a car, now my advice to young people is pay cash for a car. Whatever you can afford, go pay cash for a car. If you were to say, okay, I'm going to go buy a car. I want to get a new car. Well, make sure that you pay enough down that if next week you got into financial trouble and had to sell that car, you would not be underwater on it. You could pay it off. You could meet your obligation. Also, make sure that if you buy a car and your payment is $100 a month, yeah, try to find one for that, right? But let's say your payment was $100 a month, and you look at your budget and I can't afford $100. I can't pay $100 a month. Don't take out that loan, because I believe this verse says, "Owe no man anything." Don't put yourself in a situation where you can't meet your commitments. And if you're not able to pay that money, then you put yourself in that position. So be very careful when it comes to the subject of money. Be very careful about borrowing, and then be very careful about lending or co-signing. Under the laws and customs regarding the failure to pay debts in the world of the Bible, property could be easily seized, and even people made forced servants for the repayment of debts. So be careful about taking on the debts of other people. And Alan P. Ross said, the risk is that if someone lacks the means to pay, his creditors may take his bed, i.e. his last possession. I mean, the last possession you would ever want to give up would be your bed, right? A place to sleep. So in today's day and time, we might say the shirt off of our back or the kitchen sink when we talk about the very last thing. So be careful with your money. Verse 28, now this one happens to be just a one-verse proverb. And it says, remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. And from the days of Joshua, when he divided the promised land for the people of Israel, there were landmarks showing the boundaries of property. So if you remember, when the children of Israel left Egypt and they wandered around in the desert, God kept promising them that he would bring them into a land that he had already promised to Abraham many, many years ago. They were disobedient, so they wandered for 40 years before God finally allowed them to go into the promised land. And if you recall, Joshua and the people took the 12 tribes and they took that land and they had it divided, and they had the exact boundaries of, this tribe is going to be here, and this tribe here, and that tribe there. And then each family, it was subdivided where this is your piece of property, this is what you own. And they set up landmarks. Basically, they would, typically it would be a stone that would mark, this is the border. And that landmark would say, hey, within this border, this is our land. And it was a great crime and a scandal to remove those landmarks. You'd get in serious trouble for removing those landmarks. The boundaries were sacred because God owned the land and had given it to the fathers as their inheritance. To extend one's land at another's expense was a major violation of covenant and oath. Bruce Waltke said, unfortunately, the crime was easy to accomplish and difficult to prove. Probably the boundary stone was moved annually, only about an inconspicuous half inch. Move it over a little bit, move it over a little bit, move it over a little bit. And in time, you could have a sizable land grab. Now, obviously, this verse, while talking directly about physical landmarks, it's also talking more broadly, and it's talking about the landmarks of tradition and heritage and so forth, and says, hey, remove not the ancient landmarks. Be very, very careful. So we also understand this proverb in a spiritual sense. A landmark, a custom, a tradition, or a value should not be removed lightly. We should never assume that our fathers set such landmarks for no reason or bad reason. Now, it's kind of natural when you go from one generation to the next generation. The next generation always thinks they know more than the previous generation. The next one thinks they always know more than the previous generation. And typically try to shed the traditions, the values of those who came before. And we ought to be very careful about that. Now, we should not defend tradition just for the sake of tradition. We should test things. Is that correct? But often, if it's a tradition, it stood the test of time. It stood the questioning and the challenging of, is that a good thing, generation after generation after generation. So don't toss that aside lightly. That doesn't mean that you just have to accept tradition just for tradition's sake, but be very balanced on that. Be very careful that you follow those things that have come before you. So remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. That's a verse that's often taught on Father's Day. and it's a very, very popular verse within the Bible. Verse 29, we go back to business and money and so forth. It says, "See thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men." So, this diligent in business, this is talking about you need to show up on time. If you work for someone, show up on time. If you actually own a business, be diligent in it. Treat your customers well. Treat your employees well. Be diligent. Work hard. If anyone asks me, how can I get ahead? How can I get ahead in this life? The most important thing is from a financial perspective, work hard. Find something that you love. Work hard at it. Be a good testimony while you're at that work. Nothing irritates me more than to see someone who loudly proclaims to be a Christian, and then they show up late every day, and they work maybe 4 hours out of an 8-hour shift, and they're always goofing off and so forth. No, the Bible says, "See thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings." I think to put it sort of in today's vernacular is that you want to get promoted, stand before kings, be diligent. And if you're diligent, you're likely to get promoted. So wisdom pushes us toward excellence. God has given every man and woman work to do, and they should do that work with excellence as unto God, and not only to men. The excellence of a man's or woman's work can give them great standing in the world. More importantly, it gives them standing before the King of Kings, who promises to reward the one who works diligently unto him. Jesus taught that the one who is trustworthy in the small matters of this world will be entrusted with 10 cities in his coming kingdom. So I want to read through a couple of Proverbs here. We have enough time to do this. So it's a little bit of reading here, but I think this is a parallel to this verse here. So verse 14 of Matthew chapter 25, we all know this parable, and I think the pastor actually used this parable in a recent sermon. So let's talk through this a little bit. "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, and to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. In other words, he was diligent. He took the 5 talents that the master gave him, and he went out and he turned that into 10. He invested, he worked, and he doubled the man's money. He did good. He was very diligent. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained the other 2. Same story. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. Now, probably because he was like, man, I don't want to, boy, if I were to lose this, it would be my head. So I'm just going to hide it. And when he comes back, I'll have it for him. I'll give it right back to him. After a time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoned with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. I'll promote you. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Now, this also has more meaning than just the parable, as all parables do. It has deeper meaning, but we're looking specifically today at the diligent side of this. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. The Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Now we come to the other guy. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. Here it is. I got it for you. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, lazy servant. Thou knowest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own usury. He said, Why didn't you at least put it in a savings account? That only pays 1 or 2%, but at least I would have had some interest with this money. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him that hath 10 talents. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this is a parable. The parable is talking about taking the things that we are given, being diligent, and multiplying that and doing that well. Luke 19 has a parallel parable, and it may be the retelling of the same parable, but it gives a little bit different light on it, particularly in terms of relating this to heaven and rewards and so forth. It says, He said, Therefore a certain nobleman went into a far country to see for himself a kingdom, and to return. And he called his 10 servants, and delivered them 10 pounds, and said unto them, Occupy till I come. But his citizens hated him, and sent a message after him, saying, We will not have this man reign over us. And it came to pass, when he was returned, having received the kingdom, that he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. This guy was a good investor. He took 1 pound and made 10 out of it. And he said unto him, Well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. So he rewarded him, a big promotion. And the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, Be thou also over 5 cities. So the bottom line of that particular verse is that God gives us talents. God gives us skills, and we should take that, and whatever we do, be diligent. Know that God expects us to make something out of our lives, to gain and to grow and to prosper as much as we possibly can, and honor God in all that we do and all that we get. All right, so that is Proverbs chapter 22. Still have a little bit of time here, so anyone has a question or a comment? Boy, everybody's going to be quiet.